In this video we're going to look at using this Pressiver crimp tool, part number PR3254, to fit wire onto these crimp pins to fit into the JST XAD series connector housings. Now we're going to do this video as a series of photos because it's difficult for the camera to focus on the close-up images. We need to show the detail. Okay, so now it's going to prove me wrong. It is focusing after all. Yep, it's focusing quite well just because I said it wouldn't. Anyway, let's take a close look at these crimps. You can see there are actually three sets of tabs on these crimps. The first right here closes onto the actual insulation. The second closes onto the wire itself, and this third set of tabs should also close onto the wire itself. And of course the loop at the end is to mate with the actual pin on the header on the circuit board. Let's look now at the jaws on the crimp tool itself. Now if you look closely, you'll see that these jaws are actually divided into two separate sides, and one side actually closes tighter than the other side. That's important because it means that you have to put the crimp in a specific way. The set of tabs which closes onto the insulation has to come through from the side of the tool that we're looking at here, which is the left side of the tool as you look at it. And you can see that this side of the tool doesn't actually close quite as far on the tabs that close onto the insulation as the jaws on the opposite side, which close onto the wire itself. So what we're going to do now is to take a piece of wire, insulated wire, and the best type of wire to use for these crimps is something like 7-strand 0.2 millimeters, which is usually referred to as 7/0.2. That means 7 strands of 0.2 millimeter diameter wire, and we're going to bare about 1/10 of an inch of the insulation from the wire. Now we're going to take one of the crimp pins and push it into the jaws of the crimp tool without putting any wire in at the moment. We're just going to use these the larger set of tabs that closes onto the insulation, and because they're splayed out slightly, as we push them into the tool, they will actually hold themselves into the tool. Now we want to make sure that the crimp is positioned in the jaws such that the larger set of tabs, which is going to close onto the insulation, is in the side of the tool, which we just looked at with the numbers marked on it, 1, 2 and 3 for the different jaws. By the way, we're using set of jaws number 1 for these crimps, and the other sets of tabs which close onto the wire will be in the side of the tool, which is to the left in this photo, but it's actually the right hand side of the tool as you operate it with your right hand. Also make sure that the loop, the metal loop which is going to mate with the connecting pin, is not being closed by the tool at all. We don't want to get that crimped, and this little tab that you see at the bottom of the crimp also must be clear of the crimping tool. So let's just look at that from a couple of different angles. Okay, and now we're ready to offer the wire that we just stripped into the crimp, which is being held in place in the tool by those first set of tabs. And we're going to put the wire in so that the insulation just goes into the first set of tabs, just passes into the first set of tabs. Don't go beyond that, because we want the second set of tabs to be crimped down onto the wire and the first set of tabs to be crimped onto the insulation. Now, having said that, when we operate the crimp in that position, it always seems to close the first set of tabs and crimp them nicely onto the insulation, but that second set of tabs that's supposed to close down onto the wire itself doesn't always, in fact very seldom, closes properly. So what we're going to do is we're going to cheat a little bit now and close that extra set of tabs with a small pair of needle-nosed pliers. So there's one side of that second set of tabs closed nicely onto the wire itself, and now let's crimp the other side with the pliers, and that completes the crimp nicely, making sure that the wire is crimped into the metal. Make sure that that third set of tabs is closed down as well. Now let's fit the crimp with the wire connected to it into the connector housing. You'll see that there's a small metal tab on one side of the crimp, on the opposite side of the loop that actually mates onto the pin on the header. Now that tab is going to face outwards on the connector housing, which is a JST XAD series connector housing. So we're making sure then that that metal tab faces outward to the outside of the connector housing, and we're going to push the wire and the connector pin down into the housing. If it doesn't go in easily, don't force it, just use that small pair of pliers again to make sure that all of those three sets of crimps are properly closed down, because if they're protruding slightly, it'll stop it from going into the connector. As you push the wire in, it should go reasonably easily, and you should just hear a small click as the metal tab on the pin passes the plastic retaining tab on the connector housing. And of course that plastic tab on the connector housing engages with that metal tab on the pin itself to prevent the pin from pulling back out of the connector again.